I wonder if you know about the absolutely crazy origin stories of all Pumpkinheads from movies and comic books. Hell, in the comics, he even had a pseudo-family kind of thing with what I can best describe as siblings. So yeah, this demon of sheer ugly vengeance is one of the most dreaded cinematic monsters ever, and part of the credit goes to its backstory and of course, Stan Winston's design. And in this video, I'm going to explore each and every origin of Pumpkinhead, beginning with the movies and ending with the comic book origins. So without further ado, let's get started. The 1957 cabin origin. Haggis turns grief into a demon. You know what? The whole idea behind Pumpkinhead is, I guess, as scary as the monster itself. Like, if someone wants revenge badly enough, they go through the ritual and their target becomes marked for death. And more often than not, this death is a certainty. And once you've been marked, running and hiding becomes futile. In fact, so does help, because whoever helps you becomes a target too. And the summoner can rest assured that Pumpkinhead will find them and collect in the most horrid and horrific ways. However, as you may already know, the summoner can't rest in peace either and sit back and watch things unfold, cause as the marked victims die, the summoner starts to feel their physical and emotional pain. They also see the murders through Pumpkinhead's eyes. Pumpkinhead also feels pain from his conjurer, except for the pain that the conjurer feels from the victims. So the link works both ways, but not in any comforting, poetic way, of course. The only real way to kill the creature is to kill the person, or people, who summoned him. Furthermore, the more summoners involved in the ritual, the larger and stronger Pumpkinhead becomes. The third film makes this especially clear, because every time one summoner dies, Pumpkinhead seems to shrink until he returns to his regular height. But that's not all. There is yet another dark little rule here. If someone stops Pumpkinhead, that person's soul gets cursed with damnation. The only way to cleanse it is to let the next Pumpkinhead kill them. And if there are survivors from a previous ritual, Pumpkinhead remembers to finish that job first during his next summoning. Like, he finishes that assignment first, then moves on to the new one. Now, the first time Pumpkinhead was called was actually before the main events of the film. Although not a lot is known about this particular summoning, we know that the demon was sent after Clayton Heller, possibly along with others, because of a girl's death. Clayton insists that he did not murder her, but the people behind the ritual believed he did, and that was all the judgment Pumpkinhead needed in order to serve his brand of justice, by means of execution. Pumpkinhead chases him through town, though we do not see the demon clearly during this time. Clayton reaches the Harley farm, back when Ed Harley was still a boy, and he bangs on the door, desperate to be let inside. But Tom Harley, Ed's father, refuses his prayers, while Ellie, Ed's mother, tries to comfort young Ed while all of this goes down. In fact, Clayton even threatened Tom with a rifle and asked him what kind of Christian he is, which obviously means that the Harleys had Christian beliefs and that Tom and Clayton may have known each other in some way. Still, Tom does not open the door. Then Pumpkinhead catches Clayton and kills him outside, while Ed washes through the window. And years later, Ed works on this memory and uses Pumpkinhead for his own cause. He had already seen what happens when grief, fear, and revenge are used as tools to summon a merciless monster. So yeah, that's that. Many years pass and Ed has a son named Billy. His wife, Betty Lynn, had died in 1978. So Billy is basically the center of his world. Then a group of camping teenagers enters the story. And one of them, Joel, accidentally kills Billy with a motorcycle, and although Joel later feels regret about the whole thing and considers going to the cops with confession, Ed realizes there is no hope left for his son, and that very evening, he goes to Haggis, the witch in the woods, and asks her to bring Billy back. Haggis tells him she cannot bring back the dead, so Ed takes the next best, or rather worst option that Haggis had to offer. He digs up Pumpkinhead's disfigured corpse from the pumpkin patch graveyard and carries it to Haggis' cabin. There, she cuts the hands of Ed and Billy, pours their blood over the corpse, and the creature starts to move. As Ed faints, Pumpkinhead becomes larger and more monstrous. What makes Ed interesting is the fact that he's not really a villain in the Machiavellian terms. He is simply a grieving father, and Haggis simply exacerbates that guilt of his. Anyway, after all the bloodshed, Ed tries to kill Pumpkinhead by shooting himself in the head but survives. And Pumpkinhead, who had been knocked out, wakes up again and gets hold of another poor fellow named Bunt. As the demon holds Bunt upside down, Ed begs Tracy to shoot him and Tracy does so, albeit reluctantly, and once Ed is hit, Pumpkinhead releases Bunt and simply collapses and growls in agony before bursting into flames. Then Haggis places Ed's disfigured corpse in Pumpkinhead's grave, still wearing the necklace Billy made for him. So the next time the demon is called, Pumpkinhead will take the form through Ed's corpse. The Tommy origin. Pumpkinhead 2 turns a demon into a bloodline. In Pumpkinhead 2 Bloodwings, the story takes a strange turn from the first film. I mean, although this one is a sequel, but only in the name, it builds its own little corner of madness. We begin in 1958, in the small backwater town of Farron Woods, where an old blind witch named Miss O.C. looks for a deformed orphan named Tommy. Tommy is said to be the offspring of Pumpkinhead. Yeah, the child of the demon itself. Naturally, because people in horror stories have an emotional maturity of wet cardboard, a car full of 16 sees Tommy and concludes that he must be some demonic monster. So they chase him, armed with switchblade knives and baseball bats. They eventually trap him at an old iron mine, beat him badly and drop him down into the mine, which kills the poor kid. And with that, this movie also begins with a tragedy and the death of an innocent kid. 35 years later, Sheriff Sean Braddock returns to Farron Woods with his wife and his daughter Jenny. Sean grew up in the town and he comes back after he is offered the job of local sheriff. Jenny soon meets a group of wild kids at school, including Daniel Dixon, better known as Danny, whose father is a town judge. And as it turns out, Judge Dixon was one of the teens involved in Tommy's murder all those years ago. From here on, Tommy kills all those responsible for his death, including Dixon. And once his job was done, he turned to Danny and his friends. Sean and the town doctor head into the woods to find Jenny, but by then, Tommy had already killed Danny and 3 of his friends. He then chases Jenny to the iron mine, the same place where he died 35 years earlier. But this is where Tommy becomes very different from the original Pumpkinhead. He doesn't kill Jenny, since Sean saved Tommy's life years earlier as a boy, and because Jenny had no part in hurting Miss Ozzy, Tommy allows her to get down safely to her father. So yeah, somehow Tommy still has a piece of himself left inside the monster. Anyway, the judge's posse finally arrives and shoots Tommy back into the mine, returning him to the place where the whole thing began. And unlike the original Pumpkinhead, Tommy can be hurt and killed by ordinary means. Guns work on him, which is a major difference from his father, whose body was impervious to physical harm. The TV movie origin. Ed Hardy's corpse becomes Pumpkinhead again. In Pumpkinhead Ashes to Ashes, the series finally goes back to the first movie's revenge curse arc. And although it was a TV movie, I think Pumpkinhead works best when you keep him grounded to the original's lore. This time around, the rage that led to the summoning of the horrid monster belonged to the townspeople, who discovered that their local mortician had been stealing and selling the organs of their loved ones. As if that was not vile enough, he has also been dumping their bodies in the swamp instead of cremating them properly. That's one lazy piece of shit employee, I tell you. So anyway, the grief here is not quite grief, and you could say it is sheer anger. And that to the kind that unites a whole town and turns them into a mob, and they all want the same thing, for the guilty to pay for what he has done. So in order to make that happen, they turn to Haggis and she summons Pumpkinhead again by reviving the mummified remains of Harley. If you remember, he had been sort of buried in her backyard. And once the reanimated demon returns, he does what Pumpkinhead does. The Ed Pumpkinhead hunts down the people responsible for the desecration and delivers revenge in the most painful and ugliest of fashion. But the film added yet another layer through Doc Fraser, who turned out to be the true mastermind behind the whole organ-selling horror operation. And once he realizes that Pumpkinhead is active, he does not really care about fleeing or retribution. I mean, he knows what Pumpkinhead means and what it would do to him. And he also knows how Pumpkinhead works. So he immediately tries to do the one thing that would stop the monster. And the next thing we know, our man rushes to kill the people who summon the demon. Because if the summoners die, Pumpkinhead dies too. The Blood Feud origin. Pumpkinhead becomes a family war weapon. Pumpkinhead Blood Feud is the final installment of the series, and was released in 2007 as a made-for-television sequel. It opens in proper Pumpkinhead fashion too, as in 2 men are on motorcycles racing away from the demon until one of them hits a tree branch in his path and falls off his bike. Pumpkinhead catches him, and as the man dies, the film then cuts to a log cabin, where the summoner seems to feel the same pain that the victim feels. The survivor, Dallas, reaches the cabin and begs the summoner to call the demon off. Pumpkinhead then smashes through the window, and Dallas tries to stop him with a small pistol, but the bullets do very little. The demon claws him across the chest, and once Dallas realizes the gun is useless against Pumpkinhead, he changes the plan. He shoots the summoner instead, killing him, and that causes Pumpkinhead to vanish. Then Ed Harley appears who tells Dallas that Pumpkinhead will return, and there will be no place to hide. Lovely man, Ed. 5 years later, the story became about the Hatfields and McCoys, two families who were locked in a feud that started over a car back in the 1930s. The hatred is still very much alive, and the Hatfields make that clear when they trash a McCoy wedding. In the middle of all this, Jodie Hatfield sneaks away to meet Ricky McCoy, her true love. Ricky brings his sister Sarah along to keep watch, and soon enough, he and Jodie start to make out. Needless to say, this was forbidden kind of love, and soon enough, and sure enough, Jodie's brothers find them and accidentally kill Sarah. They then try to kill Ricky as well, but Ricky finds his sister's body and goes to Haggis for help. Haggis explains the price of summoning Pumpkinhead, and she is also seen speaking with Ed Harley's spirit. She makes it clear that what she wants doesn't really matter because only the summoner can decide whether Pumpkinhead dies. Ricky and the others summon the demon to kill the Hatfields, and by the end, most of the Hatfields are dead, along with some of the McCoy family. Ricky finally understands the scale of what he's done, and he takes Pumpkinhead down and well with him. Interestingly, this is the first film in the franchise that does not imply Pumpkinhead survived. Dark Horse Comic Origin, the unfinished exorcism mythology. Haggis the Witch is dying. Her successor is a beautiful young mountain girl named Maria, who is torn between her occult obligations and her love for David Pierce, the young son of a doctor who lives in a nearby town called Pine Falls. Disobeying his father, David makes plans to run off with Maria just as a mysterious stranger arrives in town. This is Angus Brenner, haunted Captain Ahab-like character who is investigating the recent death of Ed Harley, played by Lance Henriksen in the first film. Brenner knows that Harley invoked a Pumpkinhead demon and seeks the medium Haggis. Meanwhile, Maria agrees to run away with David but alters her plans when she finds the old witch dead. At the funeral, Maria, now the spiritual leader of her mountain enclave, confidently puts some misfit troublemakers in their place and lights the funeral pyre. Dramatically, the souls of Haggis' victims are released within the bellowing smoke, and that's where the first issue ends. Now, waiting to meet David, Maria is assaulted and accidentally murdered by the troublemakers she thwarted at the funeral in the second issue. These young delinquents are Tommy Joe, the leader, right-hand man Stroud, and Jabez and Willa, brother and sister. David finally shows up, finds Maria's body, and is overwhelmed with grief. He remembers the Pumpkinhead ritual his beloved ones explained to him, and invokes a demon himself. With sadistic glee, the fully formed Pumpkinhead hunts and savagely murders Tommy Joe, then sets out for the others. Meanwhile, Angus Brenner finds the unconscious David and returns him to his father. He then explains to the two of them the exact nature of their dilemma. David has invoked a demon to murder in his name, which is the equivalent of selling one's soul to the devil. But there's a way out for our tragic Romeo. Armed with special knowledge and a lance soon to be blessed by the village priest Angus, David and Dr. Pierce prepare to spit in the devil's eye. Now, unfortunately enough, this is where Dark Horse left things. Yeah, so they quit after just a couple of issues. But fret not, fellas. However, a conclusion to the story was found with Geometric Designs' Pumpkinhead the Metamorphosis model kit. So let's check that out, yeah? After Tommy Joe's death, Stroud and Jabez were hiding at Stroud's house, completely unaware of where 16-year-old Villa had gone. They know Tommy Joe's crimes has consequences, but they do not yet understand the kind of bill that is coming due. Then Jabez opens the front door and finds Tommy Joe's severed head suspended by tendrils of hair. The boy bolts into the woods, while Stroud gets one hard look at the damage and assumes the Mountain Enclave have come for revenge. He runs to the authorities, confesses what Tommy Joe did to Maria, and begs for protection. The sheriff looks Stroud up and heads out to retrieve Maria's body, but Pumpkinhead has already followed his prey to the station. The demon emerges from the forest and crosses the highway like the entire town belongs to him. A car swears into a telephone pole. The lights inside the police station flicker, and the deputy sees the creature advance. He fires his gun several times, but of course, bullets do nothing. Pumpkinhead grabs the poor officer and throws him through the window. Then it enters the cell area, where Stroud is already hysterical, and an old drunk in another cell watches the demon's shadow pass by. Imagine sobering up to that. No, thank you. A few blocks away, Angus Brenner, Dr. Pierce, and David approach the church when David has another seizure. Through his vision, he sees Stroud strapped in his cell as Pumpkinhead looms in the front of the bars. The creature rips the door apart, notices Stroud's desperate focus on the barred window, and gets a sick little idea. It grabs him by the hair and slams his head into the bars until his head bursts apart. Outside, David comes out of the vision, and moments later Pumpkinhead tears out of the demolished station. The sheriff and his deputies arrive, but before they can process what they are facing, Pumpkinhead leaps onto their vehicle. They fire at point-blank range, while the demon stretches out his arms almost mockingly. Then, it flips a squad car onto them and kills them instantly before heading back into the woods. Inside the church, Father Gibbon blesses Angus's lance, which is basically the weapon everyone hopes can end this demonic revenge tour. David, eaten alive by guilt, admits to his father that he has spent too much time running from trouble. He believes there is only one way to end the slaughter, but Angus stops him before he can think of taking his own life. And this is where we learn that Angus knows David's pain far too well. He once invoked the creature after a bullet meant for him killed his wife. He felt the murders, the torture, the agony, and survived because his brother, a priest, helped him break the curse. His brother died during the final fight, and Angus turned his survival into a mission: help others who made the same grief-fueled mistake. Then Father Gibbon brings them to Willa, who has taken refuge in the church since Maria's murder. Angus confirms that Holy Ground can throw Pumpkinhead off the scent for a while, so they use that advantage. David and Willa stay at the church, while Angus and Dr. Pierce head to the hills near the Enclave to prepare a trap. Meanwhile, Jabez is lost in the woods, half mad with fear. He hears Stroud's voice, steps out from behind a boulder, and finds Pumpkinhead perched above him, casually beckoning him closer. Jabez runs until he reaches a lake and dives in, thinking water has saved him when Pumpkinhead recoils at the shore. For a moment, he believes he has escaped. Then, a clawed hand grabs his leg from below. The demon could swim all along. It gave him hope because cruelty seems to be part of the hobby. Jabez reaches the shore, but Pumpkinhead pins him down and tears off both arms and watches him suffer before finally killing him by crushing his head under his foot. Back at the church, David feels the killing through another seizure and pulls out a dagger, but Willa stops him with one quiet gesture. Elsewhere, Angus explains that the plan is to dig a pit, sprinkle it with holy water and hide it, and also to use Willa as bait. Maria's parents and other enclavers arrive to help dig, because at this point, all that anyone wants is for this thing to just bloody come to an end. Pumpkinhead eventually senses Willa at the church, but Father Gibbon forces David and Willa out the back and stays behind to delay the demon. His prayers make the church a hostile ground for the creature, and Pumpkinhead escapes through a window rather than continue inside. Soon after, David and Willa reach a trap site, where the woods fall silent. Then the storm around Pumpkinhead arrives, and the demon steps into the clearing. Just as they wanted, Pumpkinhead moves towards Willa and falls into the pit. Angus prepares to throw the blessed lance, but then the creature mutates. Bone-like shoulder blades crack open and huge wings burst out, and Pumpkinhead flies from the pit in a blast of dirt and debris. It snatches Angus into the trees, while David begins to take on the demon's features, much like Ed Harley before him. Thinking on his feet, David stabs his own arm, and since the demon feels what the summoner feels, Pumpkinhead screams and loses his focus. Dr. Pierce then takes the lance and hurls it into the creature, pinning it to the ground. But the effort causes chest pain and he collapses. But thankfully for everyone, Angus then finishes the job. He drives the lance deeper and pulls it free, thereby cutting off Pumpkinhead's goddamn head. David's eyes return to normal. Later, Dr. Pierce dies in his son's arms, but at least he was relieved that David had escaped damnation. Dynamite Comics origin, Pumpkinhead returns as a modern demon of vengeance. The Dynamite Entertainment run gave Pumpkinhead the real teeth it always needed, thereby lifting him from the clutches of cliched horror tropes and making him a real punisher. The 5-issue miniseries essentially says that for each of man's evils, there exists a special demon. And if you think about it, Pumpkinhead was never really just a creature from the woods. He was vengeance itself, albeit with claws, teeth, and even some attitude. Oh, and the monster had some pretty strong work ethic, which is something I really admire, and it kinda makes most horror monsters look lazy. The comic adds 5 new demons to exist besides Pumpkinhead, each related to one of mankind's evils. That is pride, greed, envy, lust, and sloth. Pumpkinhead of course remains vengeance, because that guy has had one job since day one and, credit where it is due, he takes it very seriously. The run also brings Haggis back and gives her a more detailed backstory. As a young girl, she chose to guard Pumpkinhead, while her sister chose the other demons. The funny part, in a grim little family drama way, is that most of her sisters were cruel to her. So yes, even the witches in this universe have sibling issues. What makes this whole thing cool is how practical it feels inside the Pumpkinhead mythos. People are far more likely to call upon vengeance in something like pride or sloth. I mean, if somebody wrongs you, you might make a very bad emotional decision and summon a revenge demon. But summoning a demon of sloth? What is the plan there? Weaponize laziness? So, over time, Pumpkinhead gets called far more often than the others. Sisters summon these demons in the comic story to kill Pumpkinhead, and the reason is simply good old jealousy. Demons are kin, yes, but not the warm family dinner kind. They hate that vengeance gets summoned again and again, while they are left waiting in the dark. Envy drives them, and lust adds fuel to it because they want to unleash their hate upon the world. Meanwhile, Dear Brother Vengeance keeps getting all the action. The creature design also fit the comic book page well. Some feel closer to Winston's original Pumpkinhead design than others, but the idea itself has real weight. These are not random monsters thrown into the story to pad out the roster. They represent sins, they have witches tied to them, and they expand the rules without breaking what made Pumpkinhead interesting in the first place. The comic stays faithful to the original film's lore, which is important because Pumpkinhead works best when the story treats him less like a generic demon and more like a cursed consequence. Now, fans may notice one sin missing from that list. Any guesses? Yeah, gluttony. That is because the sixth demon, also called Exus, is already dead. A prequel story called Gluttony explains what happened, and this part gives their lore a nasty little tragic curve. Haggis had one sister who was actually kind to her, Mildred. Mildred was the keeper of Exus, and she wanted the demon to provide fatter hogs for the community. Her intention was useful, even decent in its own strange witchy way. But then she scolded the demon for eating too much, and because demons are not exactly known for emotional maturity, Exus killed her. Haggis, as the keeper of vengeance, used Pumpkinhead to kill Exus. The beast tried to eat Pumpkinhead while he had barely been summoned, but Pumpkinhead tore through Exus from the inside and killed him by bursting out of his stomach. The others may represent dangerous sins, but vengeance has a clarity to him. Once he is aimed at a target, the target will not survive. After Exus died, Haggis offers Mildred's corpse as a sacrifice. Mildred then becomes the next vessel for the demon, which gives Haggis more time to continue her duty as Pumpkinhead's keeper. The other demons eventually suffer a similar fate, because Haggis kills the sisters who summoned them in order to protect Pumpkinhead. So, by the end, the comic has explained the wider demon family, but it still leaves Pumpkinhead at the center, exactly where he belongs. And yes, the other scenes are never truly gone. So yeah, this could very well be turned into a movie or even a TV miniseries. What do you think? So yeah, that was all in this one, fellas. If you liked the video, please consider hitting those like, share and subscribe buttons. Those 3 small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these awesome videos. Stay safe and have a good one.